this application, you can see that the door jamb and casing goes all the way to the floor. Obviously I want to tuck the floor underneath that, so then I have to cut it. What I'm going to use to cut it, I'll match up a piece of floor to it and then use the oscillating saw. I got a DeWalt one, it works pretty good. Quick bit change. I just use a little flat bit with fine teeth on it. Obviously if you use coarse teeth, it'll probably split the ends of the wood and that sort of thing. I'm also going to undercut the trim a little bit here back. I'm not removing the trim on this one. I'm just going to undercut it, and then when I install my shoe molding around the casing, the floor can tuck underneath it, and I'll show you an example. Here's an example where the floor tucks underneath the base molding. And the reason why I do that is if you just cut the casing, and either you may have to, if you're going to remove the base, then you don't have to undercut it obviously, but the reason being is so I can tuck the floor all the way underneath so you don't see a little corner exposed there. And then when you put the, you can see how I cut the floor, basically notched it to fit underneath there. But then when you put your shoe molding on, it's all covered up and it's tucked under real nice. When you're cutting it, you want to make sure that the bit is sharp and that it remains flat up against the casing. I'll start it out just kind of slow. Once you got to cut this, take the bit and slide the piece out. You can see how the floor fits real nice under there. It's a nice cut, you don't have to do anything with it. Fits under perfect. I'm going to do the same all the way around, but I'm also going to back cut this base molding here. Then to get the piece out, you don't have to have a special bit, you just angle it. There it is, cut out. Now if I put a full piece in there, it'll slide under everything and you won't see any gaps. And then when I put the shoe molding on, it'll be covered up. For the door jamb, same thing. Inside the closet, I'm going to cut all the way across up into this piece of trim, because when I lay the floor, it'll be, you know, roughly a 1/4 inch from the trim, but it'll be tucked underneath, so that way I don't have to worry about cutting a weird piece or something like that. So I'm just going to cut all the way across to that corner. And make sure you back this out real good. You know, sticking a piece in there and brushing it. Want to get all the chunks of dirt and debris out of there. Result after cutting. Looks good. And also with the piece that you use, just be careful because the saw blade does wear on it. So you got to keep track of it. Flip it around or replace it as needed. It's just a cut off anyway, so. Alright, I'm getting ready to mark the piece to cut, to slide underneath the door jamb in molding. So I just took a full piece and I cut the tongue off. Each end has a, you know, like a tongue. Cut the tongue off so it could go close to the wall. And then I laid it out to where it's right about where I want it as far as depth. This door jamb is 3/4 of an inch thick. So you can see I'm about a 1/2 inch, so there's some wiggle room in there. And then I make it parallel to the floor. Parallel to this flooring, because that's where it's going to attach. And measure it from the up to there, 6 inches. 6 inches. So the depth is right there. So to figure my first cut, I just simply, just on the surface, though you don't measure off of the tongue, I measure and I put a 6-inch line. I did that on both sides. So then I'll draw a line in between them to make my straight cut for the notch. And then I have a line here, and a line here. That's going underneath the trim. You see it has to be past this casing, because otherwise you'll see that notch. So I did that, and then the closet part, that's not as deep. That's not 6 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'll just measure 6 1/4, make a line, and then measure in the back 6 1/4, because the 1/4 inch is for it to be a 1/4 inch off of the base molding. And then I draw a line in between. This closet is not square, so when I draw a line in between, I'll be cutting at an angle, but it'll match up to the base molding. You can see faintly where the line is. That's my notch that tapers down toward the end. Had I not lined the floor up, you might end up with a big gap on one end and a very small gap on the other end. You can see on one end, it's like it's about 2 1/16, and then it tapers down to about, looks like about 1 3/4 inches. So that wall's pretty crooked, but the floor will match up to it once it's cut out. Garbage can works good as a workbench. I'm cutting it with a DeWalt jigsaw. This one is actually pretty nice. It has a feature where it blows air to get the dust out of the way so you can see the line. It's variable speed. For the corners, I opted to drill holes just close to the line, and then I'll use the saw. Put the blade in the hole, cut the line each way. Now I got it cut out. I'm holding it vertically because this vinyl flooring is pretty flexible. It's a little bit thinner. It's not as rigid as some of that other stuff, but I think all of it kind of bends a little bit. So that notch is cut out. Be careful when you're putting it in. Well, let's see how it fits. Tighten up against there. This I'll have to take the tool and lock it in place. You can see there's a fairly even gap across. And a shoe molding will easily cover the gap. It's real nice in all directions. So we're all set that way. With this flooring, normally you can lift it and lock it in place, but obviously under the trim you can't do that. So you got to find a different method to lock it in place. What I found this worked really well is to take a piece of flooring and then they make this bracket for, I think it's $7 at Menards. You can hook it. And what I do, you can see how it's, when it's up like this, that means it's not locked in place because it's, you know, not able to lock in place. And then what I do is you hold firmly, push the floor down, and then make sure you got floor under here. Even though it has felt, it can still gouge that floor, and just give it a good hit on a couple different spots. And you can see it's up a little bit, but it's way better than it was. You just keep going until it's all locked in place. And it's key to keep this rested up against there, because if you don't, you can damage this lip. And I don't know, some people have recommended using the floor, but I found when I was using the floor and hitting this, it would break this lip off into here, and then I'd have to take a small screwdriver and dig that out. But this piece is locked in, it's not going anywhere, and it's not damaged. They also make like a tapping block. It's a little plastic piece that goes here, and then you hook it over. I don't recommend using that because it absorbs some of the blow, so then the floor won't lock in real easy. So another thing I'd like to point out in this closet, because I undercut this trim, now I don't have to cut a little piece of shoe molding. I can just dead end the shoe molding right into the corner. And it looks fine, you're never gonna see it, it's in the closet, and it kind of blends in better with the trim than a big chunk of shoe molding.